classes that I don't think should be all that long. Hey, was I wrong, or were a lot of you really getting brain fatigue last class? It just looked so dismal. And I think what it was one of those days where I felt like I had a lot of material to cover because I had to review what we covered already, cover the additional stuff on deindustrialization, which is hard for a lot of people to grasp, and then try to tie it all together. And I think I was probably ripping through that stuff pretty fast. So I don't know, because I absolutely am not capable of going back and listening to myself or watching myself. It's just one of the, I don't know how many of you have that, but it's like, no, I cannot do that. I feel so bad that you have to listen to my voice. I really do. If I could like put a chip in and have a cooler voice, I would do it. I don't know whose voice I would have. I'd probably go old school and get Orson Welles or something like that. But it's nature's way, man. This is what I was born with, and I do the best I can. Okay, so anyway, what we're going to be doing, if you've had a chance to look at the Moodle site after about, I think after about 8:30 this morning was when I made this available. There's your next assignment there. Remember I mentioned in the last class, I said, I'll go ahead and put it up there and everything else. We're going to be ready for that assignment. I don't think it's going to be that hard. Because if you'll notice, all I'm asking you to do is take any two of the 5 trends we've talked about. So play to your strength. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's everything right with that. And try and write about the things you understand best. And what I'm asking you to do is tell me what it is, what is meant by urbanization, or what is meant by secularization. Okay, then tell me how it's trended. If you've got a time span, it's all in the materials. Remember, all your notes are available to you and everything else. By the way, there's no reason for you to plagiarize. Just cite your sources, because I'm going to say it again. If you plagiarize, okay, what I used to do in the past when people blatantly and knowingly plagiarized is recommend that they be expelled, okay? And a couple of people were. They won't do that now. They think I'm too harsh. I don't. I think if you have insufficient discipline that you actually have to steal in order to fake a grade, first of all, you're a fool, because it means you're not ever going to learn that thing, ever. And yet you're representing yourself as someone who has learned it. You're going to get nailed on that. It will very quickly come back to embarrass you at the very least, if not get you fired from a job you wish you could keep. But the other thing is, if you're cheating and your colleagues aren't, you're actually diminishing the value of their effort and elevating your own. I guess I'm a little too egalitarian for that. I think that, everybody should get a fair shot if they do the work. So be advised. Several people tried to plagiarize during the spring term when we first went online. As far as I know, I caught every one of them. And I mean, I caught them within like a few minutes. I think I've talked with this before. I got little mojos that I can impose here, and I can figure out when somebody's plagiarizing pretty easily. I've just been doing this too long. So if you do, I will drop a lug on you. Yeah, is it possible you could get away with it? I guess, yeah, but then you have to ask yourself why. First of all, why in a lower division class would you cheat? It just makes no sense. It's not very colorful. It's not very interesting, you know. But be advised, there's also, if you look up in the, I asked you to read these. If you go into the special statements right at the top of the Moodle page, one of the things that's in there is academic honesty and integrity and dishonesty and things like that. So you've been advised formally, you know what the campus policy is, or at least you've had it made available to you. You don't cheat on expressing your thoughts. You cheat on using other people's writing as though it were your thinking. That's what plagiarism is. Okay. If you'll notice, when I talk about something, I will make reference back to either an assigned reading or the work of an author or something like that. Even when I'm speaking extemporaneously, I'll try to cite my sources so that it's not me claiming I made this up. Okay. It's just good scholarship. And as long as you're enrolled in this institution, you're supposed to be a scholar, and you might as well be a good one. And it means, have some integrity. Okay. There's no reason for one thing. 1 second. I need to do something here. Okay, there. Let me get rid of that. Sorry, something was being glitchy here. All right. So what we'll do is very quickly go through each of those 5 again, and make sure that you have a sense of, oh, okay, I now know who this is. Whoever just checked in as iPhone with no name, who is that?
It's me, Carson. My computer is not working right now for some reason.
I just wanted to make sure because, if we're going to get Zoom bombed, I'm going to find you and hurt you,
Yeah,
But if it's you, man, that's okay. All right.
sorry about that.
I just have to make sure I am technically responsible for stopping that if I can. And so I tried to let you in a couple times and it bounced off, but this time I got you and I thought I better find out who you were. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so first of all, this notion of industrialization, you hear a lot of stuff about the Industrial Revolution. Yes, it was. Because the thing about industrialization is that it's called a revolution, not only because it revolutionized technology, but as a consequence of that technological revolution, it revolutionized social formations, social structures. It created new social classes. It created a new class of people, the industrial or urban proletariat, blue collar workers. That's a creation of industrialization. Well, that's a whole orientation to living that the planet had never seen before. Okay. And so that's probably of all these, the single most transformative, right? Are there any questions on industrialization? Seemed like we covered that pretty well, but sometimes I missed something, I'm going to take your silence as a no and move on. Urbanization is it's a demographic shift. It's a change of people and the kinds of people who were in the countryside, maybe working on farms, a largely agrarian agricultural lifestyle, move into the cities and become what? The industrial proletariat. Because as we industrialized, we increased the pace of urbanization. Now, we had been urbanizing prior to that. People had been moving from country to city prior to that, but there always have been risks involved in that because if you leave the country, you're not producing your own food anymore. You're not able to make your own clothing sometimes anymore and things like that. But that trend of urbanization, of moving from country to city, of people living together in larger settlements. And first of all, it's accelerated dramatically by industrialization. And also it creates more interdependence within societies. Suddenly I'm dependent upon every mechanism of commerce and production associated with Safeway. If I got to go get groceries today, okay, I can't get any of that stuff on my own. The farmer's market, what is it, Meat in Ashland, every Saturday or other Saturday or whatever. I'm not sufficiently new age to go down there and have a good time, so I can't deal with it. So I got to go to Safeway. But that's part of the dependency of urbanization. Okay, the other thing is it does force people to live in closer proximity to more diverse populations, okay? Because in other words, it's not a question, it's harder to segregate in a city. It's done, but it's harder to segregate in a city than it is for people to leave the city, like white flight, which occurred in the 1950s in the United States and 60s, was people leaving the cities because they were becoming increasingly integrated simply because of urban migration. So white people were going out into these newly created suburbs, right? All of that's part of the dynamics of urbanization, okay? Any questions on urbanization? Okay, so you notice what I'm doing. I'm trying to explain to you what these things are, and then I'm kind of trying to tie them together. That's how you're going to do best on this assignment. Secularization. What is secularization? Microphones must be on.
Religion.
It's what?
Religious values.
No.
No?
It's exactly the opposite.
Moving away from religious values, moving from more faith-based to more science, kind of moving towards scientific.
Yeah, more or less, sure. In other words, instead of investing your faith in, in a deity or a matrix of deities or whatever you want to, depending on your religious faith, you invest it in materialism, science, so that you have an increasingly materialist society. And a lot of you, when you hear the word materialist or hear materialism, you think of it in very negative terms as a kind of pejorative, like, oh, you're so materialistic. That's not what I mean. What I mean is your confidence in your understanding of the world is not derived from someone speaking from on high and telling you your deity says this, no worries, go forward. Instead, your understanding of the world is derived from the systematic observation of that world on the material plane. What is observable? What can you see in front of you? What can you hold in your hand? What can you make sense of by experiencing it directly rather than taking as an article of faith what's going on in front of you? That's materialism. And the core of that in the more modern sense is science as a method. Science isn't a thing. Science is a method. It's a way of understanding the world. It's a way of organizing your observations and analysis of the world, okay? Religion is not that, okay? Religion doesn't involve a lot of observation. Religion does not involve much of anything that's very systematic other than a reliance on a dogma in the way that it's created. So it's a very different way of looking at the world than to say, well, yeah, some people say that's true. I'd rather see that it's true. You're moving in a more secular direction. It's like that. There's an old expression when someone says something that's unusual or something, you say, hey, nah, I'm from Missouri. And the idea that Missouri is sometimes called the show me state. Okay. And so, in fact, I think that's I'm not mistaken, am I? I think that's on their license plates. And the idea there is there's a skepticism that's characteristic of materialism and secularism that you tend not to find in people of faith. It isn't that every person of faith never struggles with skepticism or uncertainty. It's just that it's much less common because the faith is kind of comprehensive. The purpose of faith is to negate doubt, okay? Well, if you're skeptical, you're comfortable with doubt. You're thinking, well, I'm not really sure about that. Let's look into it. Let's see what we can find. That's secularization. And what we've seen...
complicated.
It's actually... The trend is actually, it's more complicated to explain than it is to observe. You can hear it in people. You can see it in people. Everything that I'm doing here is fundamentally secular. There's nothing spiritual about this. There's no appeal to faith. There's no appeal to spirituality or spiritualism. There's no notion of investing your confidence in something that is unseen or can't be verified. Okay, it's completely secular. The notion of a liberal arts education is overwhelmingly secular. Okay, and by the way, when you hear liberal arts, that doesn't mean left wing. Okay. It's the idea, it's derived from the philosophy that increasing education increases tolerance. All right, increasing tolerance increases freedom. The more you live in a tolerant society, the freer you are. It is not the more laws you have, it's the more tolerance you have. And the idea of liberal arts is these arts and sciences and things to which you're exposed. That's why general education is considered to be so important. We don't want you just to be a specialist. We want you to be a human being too. And part of that is having a tolerant view of the complexity of your world so that when you encounter complexity, you're not just dismayed by it and then immediately go back and say, well, no, sorry, I've got a belief system. You don't fit into that with your weirdness. Go away from me. Okay. You're more likely to say, well, I don't really understand that, but okay. I don't see you hurting anybody. Look, like I hate's a strong word. I hate reggae. I do. Okay. I'm just straight up. I can't stand it. Okay. I hate Bob Marley. I do. Okay. Peter Tosh, I'm down, it's, I gotta say, I mean, right. But I'm comfortable with that hate, right? I'm not inflicting it on anyone. I don't go around. Actually, I used to have a shirt that said reggae, fuck no. Okay. But that was a long time ago. And it was for a purpose, I mean, I was playing a lot of jazz then and I was very arrogant and, kind of condescending and snobby. I was about the most obnoxious 22-year-old you'd ever want to know. Very flashy though, very flashy, I must say. But I hated reggae. But what I would not do was like vilify people for their reggae. I mean, I think that, you should get off it, but do what you need to do. I don't like the philosophy. I don't like the sexism. I don't like the deification of Haile Selassie as Rastafari, that's who he was. I guess I just know too much about the roots of Rastafarianism to really relate to it. But I would never want to live in a society that criminalized it. You see what I'm saying? In other words, tolerance is not putting up with the things you like, right? It's putting up with the things you really don't like, because you have to admit, well, I don't think any great harm is being done. So the notion of secularization is you're more likely to be tolerant because you're investing in a more concrete understanding of the world rather than just taking things as articles of faith. I'm not saying it's a perfect response to that, and I'm not saying that every secular person is a great person. It's just that there's more chance that you're going to be more cosmopolitan in your views, that you're going to be able to tolerate it. First of all, you're going to be exposed to more things that are unlike you. But also you'll learn to tolerate them without emulating them or feeling compelled to kill them, that kind of thing. So are there any questions about secularization? Okay. Not surprisingly, as we've industrialized, we've secularized, because what is the purpose of industrialization? You replace human effort with mechanized effort. It leaves us more time for leisure, presumably, right, as a society, and it does, properly understood, leaves us more time for education. Education, in turn, tends to secularize us over time. And it isn't the same thing as saying, education will strip you of your faith. If you are a person of deep and abiding faith, education's not going to take that away from you. It's going to challenge it. And there's nothing wrong with being challenged, right? But it's not going to take it away from you. If you ever find, for example, if you're ever in a class where you feel that the professor is, certainly if they're vilifying you personally for your faith, people lose teeth talking like that. But beyond that, if you have a professor who's ridiculing faith, and especially when they know that you, for example, might be a person of faith, you have every reason to grieve that, okay? If you are committed to your faith and committed to your dignity, you won't just go call a cop in the sense of, well, I'm going to the department chair or the division director. You'll confront them, and you won't just vilify them. Your faith should inspire in you a kind of compassion, if not tolerance. Okay, there has to be that kind of give and take. Now, again, I've made pretty clear that, because I think it's important that you understand, my perspective is secular. Okay, there's nothing of spiritual substance behind me as a person, or certainly not me as an educator. Okay, but you won't hear me saying, and as a consequence of that, I will ridicule you for your faith. Okay, because again, the idea is, secularization and education tend to make people more tolerant, okay? They're not the only things, but certainly those things are correlated, okay? What about globalization? What's globalization? I can see that no one's going to be writing about globalization.
It's the concept that the world becomes more and more connected. So products that we use are more and more likely to be, like, for Americans at least, more and more not American made. We're more likely to have in our grocery stores like French cheese rather than just American cheese. We're more likely to have products from outside, like from international waters. And that's due to globalization.
Okay, well, that would be commercial globalization. Yeah,
Okay.
Manufacturing globalization. But as a broader concept, what else is globalized?
Could that also be like thought in itself and like ideas and whatnot?
Are you asking or telling?
Thinking?
Tell me then, don't ask. In other words, I'm trying to get, I want to encourage you to stand behind what you're saying, So do you think
yeah.
you can
So
make a case
another, I believe I can. So,
okay, good.
So let me rephrase that. It would be the trading of ideologies and ways of thinking, and
Let's say ideas rather than ideologies, which is a very narrow worldview.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That would also be, all of those kinds of things would then be traded. throughout cultures and whatnot.
When you say that, let's say ideas are traded, which is an interesting way to think about that, because, you know, Micah was talking about commerce. You're actually talking about ideas as a kind of commerce then. Is that not so?
I guess in a way when you put it like that, yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying it's an interesting way to think. What I'm trying to do is suggest ways that you might make those connections that you're making and express them in your assignment. And you know, when you're not just globalizing material production. If you think about human production, including ideas, you're globalizing those as well. So there is a commerce in ideas. All right. Now it's got a regulatory apparatus that surrounds it. You know, we have copyright laws and patents and things, or I'm sorry, as the British would say, patents, you know, and things like that. And so I think Kenny makes a great point, that that's a good way to think about that, because what it allows you to do, you could tie together, for example, then globalization and industrialization. Okay, but you could also tie globalization into secularization, because all of those are global trends. Right? The one, secularization, is more about ideas. The other, industrialization, is more what Micah was talking about. It's production, it's manufacturing, it's commerce. But there's always a kind of commerce. The idea is, with globalization, that kind of the borders are being broken down for pretty much everything. That there's much more, you know, sort of cross-fertilization in the world now. When one, you know, society somewhere comes up with an idea, the rest of the world's going to know about it within minutes, if not seconds. And so it's easier for there to be these kind of countervailing influences. Unfortunately, that can mean more reggae. But in addition to that, it can mean more good stuff too. One of the theories of globalization is that, kind of like secularization, on balance, globalization tends to encourage more tolerance. Okay, because, you know, you're exposed to different ideas in ways that you can accept them, like through your television or through, you know, commercial broadcasting or entertainment or something like that. Some people would respond with just the opposite and say, no, as a consequence of globalization, we've seen rises in radicalization. We've seen rises in the weaponization of religion. We've seen rises in racism, white nationalism. All these things are global phenomena. You know, the United States doesn't exist in a vacuum. But part of it is that if it's a, you know, let's say it's, everybody's always getting on radical Islam. I think that's not fair. But what if we instead look at sort of like militias or, you know, white supremacists and things like that? That's not just happening in the United States. There's a serious problem with that, and there always has been a serious problem with that in the UK. There's always been a serious problem with that in the Scandinavian countries. You think of them as being so benign and everything. Go and look at the history of black metal and death metal. It's Nazi, a lot of it. It's racist. It's violent. Okay, or the skinheads as part of the punk movement coming out of Britain. You know, there was a racial component of that. There was a sort of, you know, Sieg Heil component of that. The industrial movement in San Francisco. I saw that firsthand. You know, bands like Factrix and a lot of others. And, you know, a lot of those people their posture as sort of late adolescents was Nazis. You know, I don't want to start vilifying people, although I would vilify, he's a jerk. But what I'm saying is, first of all, these aren't new ideas, and these aren't American ideas. These are global trends. And a lot of people would argue they're a consequence of globalization. You can't contain those anymore, because there's a resonance that happens when, say, a white supremacist in Britain is connected through, you know, a global internet with white supremacists in Denmark, who are also connected with white supremacists in London, who are connected with white supremacists in, you know, New York or whatever. Okay. So, you know, the thing about globalization is it kind of hits you coming and going. There's a lot about it that we could argue is good, but like everything else, you know, there are a lot about it that can be bad. But it's the idea of the globalization of commerce, and that commerce can be material, goods and services. It can be ideas. It can be ideologies, which maybe, Kennedy, was what you were talking about. Maybe I got you too fast there. I apologize. But yeah, sure, something like you know, white nationalism, or something like or black nationalism. You know, I teach a decolonization class, and it's really interesting that there was a guy who was born and grew up in Tunis, right? And his name is Albert Memmi, and he wrote a book on the colonizer and the colonized. And in the North American edition of that, which was published in 1964 or 5, right? This is a book on colonialism. He dedicates it to the American Negro, the word then not being such a pejorative as it would be now, who is also colonized, okay? Well, it's clear that when a lot of radical Black nationalists were mobilizing in the 60s, they weren't just reading Americans, all right? They were reading Frantz Fanon. They were reading Memmi. They were reading Karl Marx. They were reading people, you know, from completely antithetical to American culture. Well, if you accelerate and intensify that, that's globalization. That's what we would think of as globalization. Are there any other questions on that? I mean, that's the one you hear the most about, and in some ways, probably the one about which the least might be understood. All right, and then finally, we talked a little. Oh, I'm sorry.
I
Shelby,
do actually have a question.
Yeah,
I was
sorry
just
about that. I
thinking
jumped
about
the gun.
languages, and couldn't you
Yes.
argue that globalization of languages was like during that time that also spread them further due
Yeah.
to like the
Well, go ahead if you have
Yeah.
an example.
well due to like increasing technology and then socialization like we were talking about and different things like that, you're getting to meet more people from out of your area or in big cities that are coming together that
Yes.
may not know each other immediately, but then end up learning each other's languages in the long run.
That's right. And again, as with everything we're talking about, it's not a 20th century phenomenon. I remember reading a study by somebody I was in graduate school with, who was doing linguistics. And she wrote this really good article that I now cannot find. I got to see if I can get a hold of her. She's still with us. And she was talking about the origins of certain kinds of speech in African-American communities in various parts of the country. And one of the things that she identified that I'd never seen anyone write about was the speech patterns of English as spoken by English sailors. The way that the syntax that they used and the grammar and the words that they used and things like that, and how that was part of that sort of, you know, boiling of in which this new trope of English came out, in addition to the people who obviously, you know, kind of were slave masters and things like that, or even in free states, you know, that idea that English changed in part because of exposure to people from sub-Saharan Africa. Okay. And so too did the way that, I mean, the South changed because of a large number of people who were not white. And who did not indigenously speak those languages and did not indigenously eat those foods and do those things and worship those gods and everything else. Look at what happened with Catholicism in a place like Haiti. You know, that's what voodoo is. It's a fusion, and it's a fascinating history, and it's, by the way, a lot more interesting than reggae. But that's the same kind of thing, that the idea that, well, we're just kind of tossing things together here, and it's not totally random. It's a consequence of systematic human action. You know, not just the transatlantic slave trade, but just transatlantic trade in general transforms the entire world. Okay. And it's the first great wave of what would be modern globalization. And that certainly that affected language. It affected language, it affected cultures, it affected everything. And I think, Shelby, what you're pointing out is that as we've globalized, we've just intensified and sped up that process. It's more obvious and visible and intense now. But also, it means that we've got a lot of people, for example, whose favorite literature is Japanese manga. Okay. I used to read that stuff when I didn't read it because I couldn't read kanji, but we used to get those in a part of San Jose when I was a kid that was all Japanese businesses. And two things were cool. One, the art was better than anything Marvel was putting out. Two, they read from right to left. So I was always the most badass guy with a comic book in my hand, right? Well, it took a while for that to kick in, but it reached a critical mass because of the increasing interaction commercially of Japan and the United States, that's become a dominant form of literature in the United States. And yet its origins are not Japanese. But if you take it back even further, the Japanese manga in part owes its genesis to the early development of American comic books. You know, that's globalization is what I'm saying. Does that make sense? So the main difference with what we now call globalization in the sort of popular vernacular and what's always been with us is both the intensity of the interactions and interdependencies that creates and the pace of it. It's more intense, it's more visible, it's more transformative, and it's happening faster. But it's been going on pretty much all of settled human history. Okay? So any more questions about that? I like the examples I'm hearing and things like that. It shows me that you're beginning to get much more comfortable thinking with these concepts rather than just thinking about them. You're starting to apply them, and I like that. That's kind of the purpose of this class, really. All right. If you are feeling pretty solid, then I would say go to the Moodle page. There's a description of the assignment. Obviously, if you have any questions about it at all, feel free to email me if you need clarification or something. Sometimes I think I've explained something really clearly because it makes sense to me. And then I look again, I think, well, if somebody didn't know what I was trying to say, that would look kind of stupid. So, you know, you're not going to like hurt my feelings if you say, hey, what do you want us to do here? All right, but it's any two of the 5 trends we've talked about. The strongest performance on that assignment is going to be a clear understanding of what each of them is. And if you can really make it fly, connect them together. Wherever possible, I don't want you block quoting and quoting directly. You can paraphrase, but cite the sources. So for example, if you're looking at secularization, okay, you go to the secularization article, and all you need to do, it's a Pew Research Center analysis of data. So to cite that, you could say, Pew study or something like that, right? Just let me know that, yeah, here's where I got this from. Or if it's from a specific data set, one of the things you'll notice when you look at the Pew Research data is right down at the bottom of the graphics and stuff, it'll say source, Pew Research Center surveys 2008 to 2017. Okay, so if you're quoting from that particular data set, you might use that as your source. You can just say, if you say like PRC, Pew Research Center, PRC 2008 to 2017, something like that. I want you to acquire the habit of acknowledging your sources. It's just a good thing to learn going forward as a scholar and as a conscientious scholar. Okay, but you're also reminding yourself of what you're learning. And sometimes it's easy for you by the end of a term, it's easy for you to think, I didn't learn anything. I've always known this stuff, without realizing, no, I didn't. Because when I came in at the beginning of class, I didn't know this stuff, and now I know it. And that's good because it means I didn't waste however many thousands of dollars I spent on this. All right, does Kennedy's dog have any questions?
Honestly, she just left the room, so I think she got a little bored. I'm not quite sure.
Either bored or offended. Either way, I'm good at both. So.
I couldn't tell you. Lulu's got a mind of her own, so.
There you go. You know, but check into the reggae situation there too. That might be the problem. Perhaps my remarks about reggae were offensive. All right. I once had a student who got really offended by something like that. I don't think it was reggae, but it was something else. And just went off. And it was fascinating to watch. You guys get intense about your culture, man. It's like, you don't know what you're talking about, boomer. Yeah, actually, I do really well. You know, you won't hear stuff coming out of the front of my head unless I've thought about it. Now, have I thought enough about it to know that I should shut up? No, I haven't. There you go. And I am recording all of this. So if you want to have witnesses, you know, I have to say about you, it's like you're a total asshole. I can prove it. Look. And then you'll nail me, right? Yeah, I'm down. I'm a complete and total asshole. That's the way my mom and dad made me. I blame the parents. All right, anything else? All right. I want you to put your energy into this assignment and not worry about the next module. But insofar as you have time, just be aware that the next module is going to be about culture. All right. And there are 4 different readings there. The readings can be a little complex, but I think they're useful. What I'm trying to do is kind of overbuild. For those of you who are really interested, those sources give you a lot of information. My job is going to be able to show you, okay, let's do a quick flyover of these. Here's the stuff you really need to know. If you want to go more deeply into it, though, I try to include sources that have a little more substance to them, because you're going to find every one of you at some point, particularly if you become an international studies major, one of these areas is going to be particularly interesting to you, and that's how you're going to build your track in the major. That's kind of what we're doing with this class. Is here's this, I think I mentioned this last class. Here's the stuff we do in the major. Does any of this look interesting to you? If it does, okay, come and talk to me and we'll hook you up. All right. So 11 o'clock Sunday is the deadline. This is not time bound other than that. You can start it whenever you want. You can, I would recommend that you do a draft pretty early on, even if it's just bullet points and notes, and build it in stages and then refine that before you submit it. I want your best writing, okay? I don't want sloppy writing. It's very soul killing when I have to read sloppy writing. It's 11 p.m. Yeah, as you will see when you go to the prompt, it says 11 p.m. But yes, it's 11 p.m. All right. Other than that, I will see you. I guess I will see you hopefully next Monday. Okay.
I do have a quick question.
Oh,
just
sorry. Yeah.
Specifically just for you though. So I saw my grade for the first assignment and I was a bit confused.
Let me look it up because I don't know offhand what it was.
Because you said you were just supposed to reference one country, and I did. And I found all of my information from that one site.
No, I didn't.
And so,
It's not what the assignment says. No.
oh,
If you look at the orienteering, okay, if you read the form for that, hold on just a second. Okay, hold on. It says, for any 5 of the following. Yeah, the thing that you download, that's the guideline to the assignment, says, for any 5 of the following, list the population, capital city, blah, blah, blah. Not just one.
oh, wait.
I'm looking at it right now. And
Okay,
it's right
so-
off of the site.
Okay, so you weren't supposed to just reference one country?
No, I don't know how you would have been able to do that. In other words, I list 10 countries for any 5 of the following.
Okay.
Yeah. We talked about it in
I-
class too. You might want to redo that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, so, okay, so for all of them,
No, for any 5 of the list of countries. Any 5 of them out of the, I think there are 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah.
okay,
10
so
listed,
I do
pick
5
5
of them.
and you only did 1. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So what you should do,
Okay, gotcha.
what you should do is redo that assignment and then email it to me. Don't post it up there. Email it to me.
Okay.
I'm gonna, I'm gonna accept
I
it.
think I maybe didn't scroll all the way down and look through all of the countries.
It's easy
I-
to do.
yeah.
It's easy to do. Everything.
I did it first day and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Because you said this would take 20 minutes. And so like my brain was like, okay, cool. And I was like, this took a lot less than 20 minutes. Maybe I did something wrong.
Okay, let's figure.
okay.
Honest mistake. Go ahead and do it.
And then email it back to you. Okay.
Yeah, because the other thing is, if you do 5 countries, you get more familiar with the CIA fact book, and that was the whole purpose of the exercise. So
Mhm.
let's just figure you'll make it right. Okay.
Okay.
But again, don't post it. Email it to me.
Okay. And then
Okay.
for this assignment coming up, you said, did you say don't do any direct quoting? So I shouldn't.
Well,
So if
what I
I
don't
wanted
want people-
to in
what I-
quotes.
Okay, what I don't want you to do that. I
Okay.
want you to get used to showing me that you can be informed by other people's thinking, but still speak in your own voice. That
Okay.
you've assimilated their ideas, but you're going to acknowledge them as a source of your thinking.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then even if I paraphrase, when I do paraphrase, also
You
say that it is
anything
them.
that informs
Yes.
your thinking has to
Okay.
be cited. Yeah,
Okay.
it's like you will very seldom hear me quote directly from anything, but I like when I did the thing about Albert Memmi. Okay, I will
Mhm.
always mention, okay, this is this source. This isn't me.
Okay.
And that's just it. I'm trying to teach that as a value as a conscientious scholar, that you learn that as a habit, that you're always being careful to acknowledge the people who influence you, because we never stop learning and people influence us and they should be acknowledged for that. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So are we clear on the other assignment though? You're going to make that right?
Yes, I do
All right.
understand that. So
And
I already
again,
have one
email
of
it
the
to me.
5, so
Yeah.
I'll do 4 more. And yeah.
Just do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Take the assignment you started, if nothing else, to
Mhm.
remind me that you did 1, and then do 4 more and you're fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
All right. All right. Anything else with my remaining visitors here? Or are you just hanging out till I leave? Okay, then I'm leaving. Okay. Bye.